to Tanakh Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Rabbi Cross-Examines the New Testament with Rabbi Michael, the man, Skobac. Welcome back, Rabbi. How are you this beautiful day?
Shalom, shalom. Welcome back to me, and it's great to be here with you, William.
Thank you.
On this 8th day of Chanukah, for those who are celebrating, today is the final day, the 8th day of Chanukah, and we're doing the 8th chapter of Revelation. How do you like that? There is some synchronicity in the world.
How conveniently planned. That worked out well. Yes, indeed.
How convenient.
And yeah, that's really cool. So again, it's always a pleasure having you here. Glad to see your happy, smiling face, and looking forward to. I noticed what we did. I didn't get the full title, so I kind of titled this one just because it was a really interesting point about. There's a movie. There's a movie called. It's not called Thanos. It's called something else. But Thanos is like this mean guy at the very end, and his sole purpose apparently is to destroy a third of all life, right? And so this Revelation chapter 8 talks about, the angels coming, angels of God, each one destroys a third of this and a third of that, and it reminded me of Thanos. But so I just titled it based on the third of the world being destroyed, just because it kind of it seems like a overriding topic. So anyway, that being said,
what a pleasant thought.
What a pleasant thought. Well, I think one of the titles you had was "Show Far, Show Good." I like that too. I like that. That's awesome. All right, so
we'll keep that as part of the oral Torah.
I like it. I like it a lot. All right, well, I'll turn this over to you and let you do your thing. Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, so I wanted to just share a few introductory thoughts to this chapter, but it's also really sort of introductory meditation. Again, a reflection on this book of Revelation in general. There have been many ways of arguing for the existence of God. If you go through philosophical texts, there are many different proofs and arguments to show that the existence of an ultimate, all-powerful, omniscient, omnipotent being is reasonable and it's compelling. So one of the classic philosophical arguments for God is known as the ontological proof. Sort of a fancy schmancy name. The ontological proof for the existence of God, and it's usually credited to Saint Anselm, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury in the 11th century. And it's actually a subtle argument. It's not sort of straightforward and simple to follow. It's actually a little bit complex and nuanced, but I can share one very oversimplified way of stating the argument, which is that if you're able to conceive of something, it must exist. If you're able to conceive of something, then it must exist. So if, for example, you can conceive of a being greater than everything else in existence, such a being must exist. That's more or less the thrust of his argument, although obviously it's a much deeper and longer presentation. And what this theory argues is that you couldn't really conceive of something, you couldn't even imagine it in your mind if it didn't exist. And so if you're able to conceive of it, then it must exist. And what this theory argues is that when you have, for example, I'll just try to give an illustration. Imagine if you have a bizarre dream that has incredibly unusual creatures in the dream. So minimally, what we would know is that the components of this kind of a dream must exist, or you couldn't have imagined it in the first place. Let me illustrate. Imagine that a person has a dream about being attacked by an alligator, and the alligator has the head of an elephant, and the fingers of the alligator look like bananas. So it's bizarre, it's strange, it's like unbelievably weird. But the person wouldn't be able to dream that unless they had already seen in real life alligators and elephants and bananas. Meaning that you can't conceive in your mind of something that doesn't exist. And therefore, since we can conceive, we can imagine an ultimate being that we refer to as God, then God must exist. And this is what we see, I believe, behind a lot of the visions in the book of Revelation. I'm sharing this thought basically as an introduction to what I wanted to say, that there are often in the book of Revelation very bizarre images. But the reality is that they already exist. They're drawn from a palette of images that already exist because they're found in the Hebrew Scriptures. And this is something that we'll see, for example, throughout the book of Revelation. We're going to see it in this chapter. And when you go through these chapters in the book of Revelation, all the images seem very familiar because they are. They have already occurred. We've already seen them in the Tanakh. So, for example, what are some of the images we're going to see in this chapter, chapter 8? So we're going to see the mention of scrolls, the mention of heaven and angels and trumpets and the temple altar and the golden altar and the censer and incense and saints and the throne of God and thunder and lightning and earthquakes